Sit down if you want to.
Right in the middle of what's going on.
I'm in the middle of an interrogation.
Take a seat, young Skywalker.
The middle children of history, man.
Middle of the day, Alfred.
Please, take a seat there.
Right now, I'm in the middle of nowhere.
Stop the middle, it's a base hit!
Meeting in the middle.
Like.
They fought for the freedom of middle.
The middle of
the middle of a middle.
In the middle of a war! This is freaking ridiculous!
Why don't we have a seat and talk it over?
No! Not the middle seat!
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Middle Seats Podcast, the best seat in the house for all things movies and entertainment. My name is Andrew Auger. I'm your host as per usual. I'm joined by Nate Lungarini and Jake Hensler, and here you are joining us in our review of Joker. On this review, we'll talk about the movie, then we'll just rate it, and then we will head into our spoiler section. This is part of a larger podcast. You can look for the time codes in the description to skip to the different parts of this podcast. If you want to hear the full thing, look for us on Spotify, on Stitcher, on iTunes, or you can look on a different YouTube section and find our video where we talk about certain things that we've missed over the last couple of months because we've been gone for a little while. As you join us here, let's listen a little bit here to the trailer for Joker.
You don't listen, do you? You just ask the same questions every week. Do you have any negative thoughts? All I have are negative thoughts. People are starting to notice.
You think this is funny?
Murray, one small thing. Can you introduce me as Joker? Send in the clown.
That was a piece of the trailer for Joker, which, by the way, I thought had two very, very good trailers. And it made someone who was skeptical like myself a little bit more excited for it. It was directed by Todd Phillips, who before this point was best known for the Hangover trilogy and Old School and War Dogs and movies like that. It stars Joaquin Phoenix. It's a standalone adventure. So it's completely different from the DCEU. It doesn't take place in any kind of universe. It's a standalone story about how one man, Arthur Fleck, became what we understand to be the Joker, although it is a very different Joker than ones we've had in the past, played by iconic performers like Mark Hamill, Jack Nicholson, of course Heath Ledger, Cesar Romero with his painted over mustache. There's a lot of iterations of the Joker, but we've never quite seen one like this. This has been a massive hit. It's almost made $1 billion. It will probably already have $1 billion by the time you listen to this.
That's crazy.
At this point, it's $986 million worldwide. It's a massive hit.
What is it at domestically?
Domestically, it's at 313.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. People are split on this one. The people that love this movie really love it. And then the people that don't have a lot to say about it. Regardless, everybody has a lot to say about it. We'll have a lot to say about it here. Let's start with Jake Hensler. Jake, what did you think of Joker?
I see what you're doing.
All I did was toss. That's
I think we can all agree Joaquin Phoenix was unbelievable. He was outstanding. So we all started out skeptical on this movie, and it's actually pretty funny. When this was announced, we said the only person we can see playing the Joker other than Heath Ledger is Joaquin Phoenix. And then they cast him, and we all went, oh, okay, all right, good move, I see you. And it certainly proved to be a good move because Joaquin Phoenix was outstanding. But I'm one of those people who, I enjoyed the Joker a lot more than I thought I did. Like, a lot more. I thought it was pretty great. I thought it had a lot of interesting things to say about society and mental illness. Well directed in the sense that it is dark. And although the violence is a little few and far between, it's not consistent like a horror movie. When it happens, you feel it. And it is effective. It is jarring. When I really react to something, like my hands over my mouth, or I feel myself clutching something, or my shoulders kind of dip down, you're getting a reaction out of me. And I felt all of that. And I think start to finish, it was just overall very well done. Not a perfect movie, but I found myself enjoying it really quite a bit more than I thought I would.
Nate, we had a discussion about this weeks ago, but I forget where you land on it. So I'm very curious to hear what comes out of your mouth right this second.
Pineapples.
I get it. Unpredictable like the Joker himself.
Yeah. We're going to cut the rest of your review out. That will be the only thing you say in this podcast
Nate
about
Lungarini's thoughts on the Joker.
All right. So I will start with Jake's affirmation at the beginning there. Joaquin Phoenix absolutely sold this movie. He did a fantastic job on the role in a way that I don't think any other actor could have pulled off.
Yeah, I really don't think anybody else could have done it.
I think when we initially reacted to the trailers to this, I was really intrigued on how we're essentially doing an art house superhero movie. Now, that said, having watched the movie, this is a movie that really tries to shed almost every aspect of the superhero genre it can from itself. And I think for the story it's trying to tell, that was important to it. But there are definitely times where it feels like a completely different movie, just with a, for lack of a better term, Joker paint job on it, you know? There's a lot of similarities to a lot of other dark, not quite anti-hero, but just like bad person kind of movies. And the movie promised that it would make you think about society and yourself and like your dark side and whatnot. And I think what this movie illuminated for me was basically the fact that I don't like this type of movie. I think this is well made for what it wanted to be, but it just doesn't fit my taste. I don't enjoy watching a bad character continue to do worse and worse things over the course of a movie. I think Joaquin did an amazing job as that role, but I just wasn't really engaged in the story at any point. Overall, I will be positive on it, but I'm not looking for this type of movie all the time, and I'm definitely not going to look for this movie a whole lot more.
I get that. I agree. I hope not a lot of movies try to emulate this, because I don't think it would go well.
I think the big thing for me is that it does feel like kind of an emulation on its own. I think that was one of the bigger problems I have with it. I just spent all that time setting up the extremes of people. There are people that are obsessed with this film. There are people going to the Bronx and like dancing on the staircases in like a terrible part of the neighborhood. They have been told not to do this, but they love this movie so much that in like 30 degrees, they are going to dance to the song that I knew to be a part of like sports stadiums before this movie. Like they played it at New Jersey Devils games, and now it's apparently a big association with the Joker. People love this movie. People also really hate this movie. It is a war online that we have not seen since probably Star Wars: The Last Jedi. And I kind of sit somewhere in the middle where I think this movie is okay to mediocre. It's in that middle section for me. And it feels like I need to like guard myself saying that because of how things have developed with the mystique of this movie. And I'll get into why. I think there's going to be a lot that I agree with Jake, and I think there's going to be a lot that I agree with Nate. First of all, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Joaquin Phoenix is the front runner for Best Actor.
Yeah, he better at least get nominated.
I think there's no shot he doesn't get nominated, especially since the movie is a hit. He's chilling. He's raw. It's unbelievably physical.
Absolutely.
How people lose weight for roles.
He looks gross.
He looks disgusting. He looks sickly. And the way he uses that sickliness for physicality and physical comedy and sadistic movements, it is a very, very credible performance of a person who only has one foot in the realm of insanity. I think it works as a character study. I don't think it works as a Joker movie, and I don't think it works as this big, broader exploration of darkness and mental health that people really want it to be. It really didn't work that way because all I kept thinking of was a much more gifted and maybe subtle kind of director could have made a masterpiece out of this. And I just don't buy into Todd Phillips as director. I don't. And I'll get into why later, but a lot of the times it just felt like Taxi Driver light to me or Fight Club light. These are movies that have done similar things much better, in my opinion. But overall, I think it really, really works if you just look at Arthur himself. But anytime you go beyond that, it's kind of a mess, in my opinion.
I think we're going to have a good discussion in spoilers.
I think we are too.
Yeah, there's only so much we can talk about before spoilers. And I would say one of the things is if you didn't know or recognize Joaquin Phoenix as one of our finer actors, you do now.
Yeah. I don't know how that would be possible, but
yeah, he's been great since Gladiator, maybe before that. He's just been, maybe if you're not a movie buff and you don't see some of his smaller things, everybody knows who he is right now. I don't know that there's anybody else who could have played this.
Yeah, it's a different type of charisma because, like Drew was saying earlier, there's the physicality of it. There's the way he contorts his back, his arms, his face into these really creepy shots. And to Todd Phillips' acclaim here, there are some really cool stylized shots, like when he's really going through his Joker transformations. Like there's the really popular one from the trailer where he's in like just the bottom inches of the frame looking up towards the ceiling that are just really creepy to watch on screen. It looks like you're watching a very sadistic ballet with just Joaquin Phoenix moving around the room and contorting his body in all these weird ways. It's something that a talented actor can pull off, and not everyone is a talented actor in the way that Joaquin was in this movie.
No, absolutely not. Yeah. I can't believe they got him to agree to this is the big thing. And I'm glad he did.
I heard it took a lot of convincing, but yeah, he was pretty much the only person that I was okay with doing this.
Yeah. And I think, like, Nate, another word I would use, aping off of what you said with charisma, it's magnetism more than anything. Because I do think there is a little bit of an implication with charisma that it's charming. Whereas you just can't stop watching him, even if you're disgusted by him, and even if you just, like, cannot believe some of the things that he's doing.
Sure. It's kind of like that, you know, that car crash comparison. Like, you can't look away. There are some moments where I'm like, I am so uncomfortable, and I'm not going to blink. I'm going to keep watching whatever he does next.
And I think, like, I agree with you guys when I'm thinking about it more and more. I think the technical aspects of this movie are really strong. The production design is awesome. Like, just how Gotham City looks, how grimy. Grimy and, like, it looks like a city that has a big trash strike going on. It does. The cinematography is good. The score is really strong. All of that stuff worked, but I had issues with the story, and I had issues with the tone. And those are really, really important.
Yeah, I definitely agree on the story aspect. It all just kind of felt flat. Like, when you have a story like this where you are already going into the movie with your impression of who the Joker is to you. You know the Joker is a bad guy. And this movie sold itself on being an origin story, or at least a version of an origin story. But when it comes to arcs, I didn't really get anything out of his character. He started pretty bad.
Yeah.
They don't waste any time telling you, this is a mentally unstable person.
I agree.
But he doesn't start bad.
No, I disagree.
He starts happy.
I disagree.
No, he starts happy and upbeat. No. He has a positive view on the world.
He does not, I don't think. But, okay.
No. I think he does, more or less, yeah.
All right, we'll get there when we get there.
Yeah, we'll get there.
My impression, like, he started off definitely wrong foot forward, already was in this dark place. Rather than, like, an arc of a character, it was just like a straight line down. Like, how low can this person go? And there's definitely characters like that works.
Yeah.
I liked your example of Fight Club and stuff like that, but it's hard to relate to that as an audience, and it's hard to stay engaged with that because you just know it's going to keep getting worse because that's what the movie keeps feeding you. And there needs to be some sort of engagement there. I'm not saying the movie needed to be funnier or smiley or like needed to make the Joker more sympathetic than he is, because he's not sympathetic. He's a serial killer. But I feel like this needed more of a soul than what I saw. And I know this is vague and very up in the air kind of talk, but it's really hard to put my finger on why I didn't connect with this movie. And I think it really has to do with just the type of this movie that this is.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm finding this such an interesting movie to discuss, because there are critics who thought it was brilliant, and there are critics who thought it was awful. There are general people who thought it was disgusting and despicable. There are people who are fascinated by it. I saw recently a psychologist posted his take on it on Facebook, and he thought it was really interesting. Like, critics are mixed on this. People are mixed on this. All kinds of people are all over the place for this movie. It's so interesting.
Yeah. Nate, let me WWE tag team in for you here a little bit and kind of go off of what you're saying. Like, we're forming the arms of the Megazord, and we need someone to be the middle.
Yeah, I kind of had a feeling this would happen.
I just think I agree with everything you're saying, and I think the reason that the story doesn't connect is because the movie is so relentlessly over the top and grim. Like, you need a little bit of levity. Like, Fight Club is another good example. I'm not trying to go back to stuff, but the movie invites comparisons to movies like Fight Club and Taxi Driver.
It does, absolutely.
Especially Taxi Driver.
Which are dark movies, but they have moments of lightness and comedy and realism and real people. This movie is so relentlessly mean, down to all the supporting characters, except for one exception who is not even a character at all, and we'll get into that in spoilers. But if the goal is to make a movie that is nihilistic and nasty and dark, then it achieves that. But what's the point? Like, I don't think we're learning anything. I don't think the deeper meaning works in any kind of sense for me, because this movie just exists in its own little bubble where it just doesn't work, except for just to point out how terrible and shitty the world can be sometimes. Like, okay, what else are you saying about that? Nothing else gets across for me because it is so focused on being so mean-spirited.
You know, I think that puts it into a better way than I was trying to do. My biggest criticism, I guess, just boils down to what is the point you're trying to make.
Yes.
Because there's lots of memes. We live in a society is the meme of this movie, you know? But that isn't a story in its own.
Yeah.
I agree. I think with a better director and more of a driven home point, this may have guided more people into a positive territory, but I think it kind of plays both sides of the coin, especially to the end, which we will get into spoilers, but for me, it was just a portrayal, and so a lot of people have the idea of nature versus nurture, where this movie was really in the favor of nurture. So I disagree with you guys that he was already a bad guy. He had goals, aspirations. He followed his mother's advice of smile, put on a happy face. Like his life was in a bad place, but he had goals and had dreams and aspirations, and was playing with the little kid on the bus, and people are just mean to him. He started relatively happy and was just beat and beat and beat. And you're supposed to sympathize with him at first, but toward the end, you're supposed to just understand how he got there, not necessarily relate and sympathize with his actions. We all know murder is not okay. Rational people understand that. But we understand how he got there, and then we realize, wow, that's terrifying. Let's do better.
Yeah. I think we need to dive into spoilers because we're towing the line.
Yeah, it sounds about that.
We're towing the line, and you almost went over there, I think. It was close.
Well, we know Joker murders people, so that's not a spoiler.
I mean, yes, but... So let's get into our ratings here. If you just joining us for the first time, we operate off of the seat scale. And it goes like this. If we think a movie is amazing, it has almost no flaws whatsoever, we give it a royal throne. If a movie is great and we think it has minor flaws, but ultimately is absolutely worth recommending, we give it a plush recliner. If a movie has some major flaws, but we still think it's worth your time, at least for the discussion, we give it a wooden seat. The inverse of that, if we think a movie is not worth your time because it has so many problems, but there are a couple of nice little nuggets in there, we give it a damp lawn chair. And if a movie has no redeeming qualities whatsoever, we give it a sleazy outhouse. And if we think the movie is worth seeing in a theater or on a big screen, we give it a little bag of popcorn moniker right next to it. It's a little extra for you. Jake, since you were getting the ball rolling, why don't you give your rating here?
I agree it's not a perfect movie, and I don't think it's outstanding. With a better director, it could have been something a little bit even better, but I really, really enjoyed it. I'm going to give it a pretty high-end plush recliner, and if you do want to see this movie, I think a theater experience with a good audience would benefit from you. So, I mean, now it's a little late. It's been out for a month, but I would say bag of popcorn. Yeah, I liked it. I'm going to say plush recliner, worthy of your time, if you can handle dark, gritty, violent kind of stories. If you can't, not for you. Like, my mom should not watch this. But generally, if you like movies like that or you can handle it, I would recommend it.
All right, Nate, what'd you think?
Despite my earlier criticism about the story, I still think it had a vision of what it wanted to be, and I just don't agree with the vision. So therefore, it's kind of middle of the road for me. I'm going to go a wooden seat on this one. Again, Joaquin is amazing in the role that he's given. Set design, music, all this other stuff is very competently done. The rest of the movie doesn't live up to the rest of those expectations. So middle of the road for me. I'm going to compare this a lot to your Taxi Drivers and your Nightcrawlers. At the end of the day, I'm just not high on those movies. I think they're well done, but I just don't connect with them, and this had the exact same vibe for me. I'm not this type of person.
That's true. You are a Good Morning Sunshine kind of guy, so.
I am a Good Morning Sunshine kind of guy. So yeah, middle of the road, wooden seat for me.
Nightcrawler is a really good one. I didn't think of that, and that kind of helps me drive my point home too, I think, a little bit. Nightcrawler is a very similar movie to Joker in how it handles its protagonist, where you kind of look at him as a bit of an alien, but it's different in tone because I genuinely think that Joker, and I'll get into why, but I think Joker wants you to sympathize with Arthur at points. Tone is the point that I'm going to continue to hammer home, and it will continue to hammer home into spoilers, and made this kind of a mixed bag for me. Joaquin is incredible. You need to support him. I think him alone makes this a wooden seat. But I think you need to see it for the discussion as well if you haven't seen it already, because people around you will be talking about this for months. I mean, I saw it a second time 2 days after I saw it originally, and I liked it a little bit more. But overall, I can't say that I liked this movie. I appreciate some things it does, but overall, didn't work for me, really. I'm glad it's interesting, at least. So it's a wooden seat, probably be like wood stolen from an orphanage because the Joker's a jerk. So let's get into spoilers here, because while there isn't a lot to say plot-wise per se, there's a lot of moments that I think will build arguments.
Whoa! Oh, spoiler alert.
Spoiler! Spoiler!
Excuse me, spoiler alert!
All right, so let's start off with Joker's turning point. Happens, I want to say, in the first 15 minutes of the movie, where there's 3 guys bullying him on the subway.
No, I think this was more midpoint. I don't think that was 15 minutes.
I think it's half hour. I don't think it's midpoint, but I think it's end of first act.
Yeah,
okay.
Maybe there.
Whatever. It's early in the movie is what I was trying to get at. And in self-defense, admittedly, kills 3 people on the subway who are antagonizing him. And that's like the turning point. And that's when the Joker becomes an item in his own universe, where other people are paying attention to him. And he gets like that adrenaline rush of like, wow, I'm important. I made a difference. He starts his real descent into darkness. Maybe part of my bias is that I assumed that was much earlier in the movie. But like right there is where the movie is asking you to take a stand with the Joker. Do you sympathize with him as someone who is trying to save his own life? Or is he a complete psychopath for killing these people pretty gruesomely? Like, he could have just killed one or shot one, but like he goes all in and
he runs after the
headshots,
dude,
right?
Yeah,
and runs after him. Yeah, like I think makes it pretty darn clear that right there is the sign that you should not be rooting for this guy.
Right. See, he even lost me 5 to 10 minutes before when he's stalking Zazie Beetz.
Yes, very creepy.
Right.
Very.
What
creepy.
I disagree with is I think the movie is, until the end, is a lot of gray points. We're just getting it from the bad guy. We're not getting it from the good guy. We're not getting it from Batman. We're getting it from the bad guy who falls and succumbs to all this terrible stuff. So, like, I think we've all been in a position where, you know, whether it be in grade school or you just have a really bad day at work, like, you want to take your anger out on somebody. If somebody could be so mean to you, you want to beat the hell out of them, but you don't because you realize that's not the right thing to do, and you take the high road. This is the scary version of taking the low road. So we can understand where he's coming from, but then we kind of fear and go, wow, this is how bad it can get. I think the movie gets elevated for me toward the end where he's on Murray Franklin's talk show. Because for me, that's where you get both sides of the story, in my opinion.
Yeah. Fun role for Robert De Niro, by the way.
Yeah, like, this movie's not a feel-good movie. You're not supposed to walk out of here going, wow, that was so interesting. It was like, oh, God.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was brutal. Because they give you the side of the low road, and it goes that way because it's a Joker story. It's not a made-up character that somebody decided to write. It's a Joker origin, so he's gonna end up the villain. It's his portrayal.
Yeah, I don't think Nate and I were expecting this to have a happy ending or anything like that.
No, definitely not.
I think my biggest thing, just thinking back to that specific scene, it kind of encapsulates a lot of what I'm feeling. This movie's fucking corny at points. Like, these douchey stockbroker characters, like, straight out of a cartoon, they are like a bad guy that Batman would run into. There's no nuance anywhere else in the movie besides Arthur. There's no nuance anywhere. Everybody's an asshole except for Zazie Beetz, and she's dead. Or not dead, a ghost for most of it.
Right. And I agree. And every other character that's not Joker or maybe one or two other people is very, very 1D, 2D kind of character.
Yeah, and that's a problem for me because this is supposed to be like trying to relate to realism and, you know, and like trying to ground its themes in our society. And it's like, well, this is not how real life is like. There are people with good things about them and bad things about them. Not everybody is a cartoon character.
And not everyone is out to get you in particular.
Exactly. Yes.
I live in New York, and and the biggest characteristic about this city, in my opinion, is that nobody cares about anybody else. Like they are just trying to get from point A to point B.
Yes.
I feel like Gotham as a city in this movie is portrayed as like angry red eyes everywhere you walk.
I
And
agree.
literally every interaction you have has to be negative.
That's a good point.
You know, this movie could really benefit from, they don't have to be major characters. They don't. Just like a person he walks by in the street that just happens to be a good guy. More people like the little person who was genuinely kind to him.
Or even just ignore him. Like, it seemed like everyone passing him by was going to assault him or call him a name or something. Like,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it was so much.
I think that's kind of what it was getting at, though. Like, now I agree, because that's not realistic, so we can't relate to that, because I've never experienced a quarter of the things this guy has gone through.
Yeah.
But basically every scene is tailored to beating this guy down to his wit's end, and the result is really, really terrifying.
When we say realistic, we're not expecting story beats to realistic. Like, a guy takes a gun on a talk show and just sits there with it. Like that would never happen in real life. But that's fine as far as the context of the plot of the movie. We are talking about, this movie is very interested in saying things about mental health in our society, saying things about cynicism and violence in our society. Well, okay, that's all well and good, but this is not our society. This is a dystopian society that exists on its own. So that point doesn't translate for me. It doesn't.
Mm-hmm. An interesting point, because it is over the top, but I think because it's a Joker movie, it had to be over the top. And I guess that's where the line ends up becoming, at least for us, where for me, society is rough, and a lot of people don't have sympathy or empathy for people who struggle. Like, people get bullied all the time, people get beaten all the time, nobody cares if you have issues until you come out, again, not justifying it, not saying it's right, but until somebody commits a mass act of violence and all of a sudden they get the attention. And I actually want to pivot to the end of the movie, because I think that's where it was elevated for me. His really just the talk show and afterwards. So he shoots Murray Franklin on his show, but I think Murray Franklin who's Robert De Niro, has one or two lines that really, really sat well with me. I understood both sides of their dialogue. So where Joker is saying, nobody thinks about the little guy, everybody's so mean to each other, everybody's yelling and fighting all the time, nobody cares if whoever's down, nobody wants to help each other, everybody's just rough and ruthless, and there needs to be a change, and he's right. Violence isn't the answer. And Murray Franklin says that's a lot of self-pity you're wallowing in there. And he's also right. If you're just going to sit there and talk about how society sucks and your life sucks because of how wrong society is, yeah, you're not going to find an answer. You're not going to get anything out of it. Life is really, really rough sometimes. You're the only one who can change your life. Now, yes, he was beaten down by insane circumstances, and we're supposed to sympathize with him there, but then we're supposed to fear him with what he does at the end. Like, I would never go on a talk show and kill somebody because my life sucks. That's where he's the Joker and he's the monster. But we understand how he got there. And if people were nicer to him and kinder to him, even just a little bit, maybe this movie would have ended differently in a hypothetical scenario.
I like that story, but the one that we got on screen was just a touch different.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it stems, from the mental health aspect of it that I felt wasn't really addressed properly. When you look at the big picture, this character, Arthur, most of his problems stem from the fact that he has this condition, and it's revealed that the reason he has this condition is because he was abused by his mother.
Nate, we're forming the legs now. We're forming the legs.
We're forming the legs. And he was abused by his father, and his mother had like these psychotic visions, and he was adopted as a part of these psychotic visions. So a lot of his problems are stemming from his mother and not from the society that we've been trying to understand this whole movie.
I'm so excited right now. Ugh.
Right, but he wasn't a monster until he got mugged, beaten, fired from his job, which was partly his fault. But
I think that's just
a lot of his fault.
That's just a point that we don't agree about. Because, first of all, that's the very beginning of the movie, isn't it?
That's in the beginning, but he's also made publicly mocked by his hero, Murray Franklin, which, if he had kept his job and not been publicly mocked, he may have not turned anything and just had mother issues. But the combination sits there.
He had already murdered people by then, though, hadn't he?
Yeah, but that was from society beating him and mugging him, and he didn't know about his mother until halfway through.
See, I don't agree with that. I don't. This movie, if it wants to say that society molded him into the monster he is, fine. It completely undercuts that for me when it reveals that he was like abused as a child. Like completely undercuts that specific part of the theme.
And that abuse stemmed from his mother's mental illness and not his own mental illness.
Right.
Which again, we were trying to understand through the course of the movie. You know? So why make that big twist so central to who this character was in like a gotcha moment as opposed to us learning the city and learning himself?
Right.
Why does his mother need to be such a huge part of his identity?
And this is where like little tweaks I think could have made this way better. Like you take that out.
The mother stuff?
It works a lot better for me. The mother stuff.
Yeah, and the Thomas Wayne stuff, like, oh, maybe he's actually Thomas Wayne's son. Like, that was dumb.
Yeah.
That was
I didn't
dumb.
love the Thomas Wayne stuff either. I think they could have gotten across the rich have it better than the poor without making it Thomas Wayne, because then that kind of affects Batman, and I didn't love all the Thomas Wayne stuff either. I'm with you there.
It can still be Thomas Wayne. Don't make it like a family soap part of it. Like, just make him a figure you see on the TV. But then you don't have much of a movie, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's building a rivalry between Joker and Batman, but I didn't love that aspect of it either. I thought that could have been done differently. I guess the society is because that's what he seems to focus on when he's on the Murray Franklin show. I guess the mother thing, I guess that is a little bit overkill. They could have taken it out and it still would have worked, but that kind of felt like the straw that breaks the camel's back. Like, his mother was his only support system, and when he finds out that was all a lie, he's just,
But he kills her! Like, that was his only support system, and he kills her.
But I think that's when he becomes fully okay with everything in my life sucks. I don't care. I'm going to start murdering people.
I mean, I buy that as the point
fun.
when he completely snaps inside of the plot. I'm just saying it was kind of it wasn't really a stable pillar to go up on. Circling all the way back for me, because I do want to talk about that scene with Murray Franklin.
That was one of the pinnacle scenes for me.
It's a perfect example to me of show don't tell. Because those kind of themes could have been laced throughout the movie if the movie was less in your face and it was much more nuanced and subtle, and it had these characters that kind of provided something for the darkness to play off of. Like, Murray just saying that, like, this guy's been a dick the whole movie. Like, him to kind of try to play that card, it's like, nah, dude, you kind of suck too. Like, am I supposed to be sympathetic to what you're saying? Get off your high horse too. If we had seen Murray be like a actual person before that, it would have worked better for me.
So for me, I guess you had to imagine a little bit, because Joker calls him out on it. You brought me on the show to make a mockery of me, and that's cruel, and he's absolutely right. He's right. Awful.
He is.
That's absolutely awful. So Joker calls him out and calls him an asshole or a terrible person, whatever. And Murray goes, "You don't know me. You don't know anything about me." And he's right, but where you're right is that would have been better if we saw him maybe taking care of his own family and looking to pay bills, because we know he's getting Joker on to get views, and that'll get him money. So if he's struggling with getting his, medical bills or, kids through school or something like that, where we can sympathize with him a little bit and we get both sides of that coin. Yeah. Instead, we just hear him say, "You don't know anything about me." And technically he's right. We just know what his sin is, which is bringing the Joker on to make fun of him.
Yeah.
At the risk of pissing off Jake here, like, I'll be honest,
good start, yeah.
When we got to this scene in the movie, I felt like I had kind of checked out. I feel like the movie had already made its points. People suck. The main character sucks. Everyone that he interacts with sucks. And it was just such a dark picture of everything. We needed to have the pushback because we as an audience know that the Joker is not a role model in the scenario.
No, he's not.
All.
Yeah.
So you needed to have him make his grandstanding speech about we live in a society, and you needed to have the pushback of like, you're actually just insane. And it just felt so preachy to me at the end that I kind of just checked out.
Oh, really? I love the ending. We finally understood both sides.
I wasn't checked out because I thought the execution of the last 30 minutes was okay. Like, it was tense. And there were some
Yeah,
shots.
that was
Like I
very
said,
tense.
the technical stuff was keeping me in it.
I got more out of the cab ride after the fact, where Joker was looking at the city that he'd created and like loving that chaos than him telling us like what his ideas were. I got more of him smiling at the destruction rather than telling us society's not worth saving. You know?
That was one of the final points I wanted to bring up, where I think it does kind of have a message, because his entire he says this himself, and he wanted to be seen and heard, and he said his whole life he felt like he's never been seen, nobody's listening to him. But now that he killed somebody on live television and he's violent and he's made himself known, people are listening. So he was never empathized with his entire life. Nobody cared for him. They were mean to him. But now that he's rash and he's violent and people relate to that, the lesson he's learning, it's not the correct lesson. The lesson he's learning is that violence is getting me the attention that I'm looking for. So what is he going to keep doing? He's going to be violent still. We need to be empathetic with people before they get violent, and we need to show them that violence is not the answer. The more attention we give to violence, the more mentally ill people like Joker are going to think that's the norm. And I think that's what they were getting at. Nobody empathizes or cares for him the entire movie, but all of a sudden he's violent and he's got a cult following. That's not okay.
Yeah, but he's a violent person in a world that's almost exclusively violence is my big thing. And like I said, when we're talking about like Arthur himself, Joaquin is just so freaking good. Like how he's laughing on the offbeats when he's at the comedy club. Like I thought that was so like chilling. Like that was more chilling than like any of the actual stuff that he did later in the movie. It's a movie bereft of comedy. It doesn't have any really funny moments, I don't think, except for the little person trying to open the door.
Thank you.
Like that was good.
I took the words right out of my mouth. That was the only laugh out moment in my theater.
Yeah.
That was kind of a small gripe I had too. The lack of comedy, other than making fun of like small people or little people or whatever. I'm like, that's so cheesy and lazy. You can do better than that. You directed The Hangover.
See, I actually that was one of the only moments I really liked. We're like completely on different wavelengths.
Felt like
it was dark.
Joker.
It was dark humor and like something that the actual Joker would do.
Well, yeah, the scene I liked, but I felt like the only attempted humor was the big fat guy making fun of the small guy. And I'm like, that's the only humor you have for a Joker movie? You could do something else.
The bleakness, man, across the board. All right, let's start to wrap up here. Nate Lungarini, give me your final thoughts here on Joker.
You need some sort of contrast. You need a light to cast shadow on something, and this movie was just all black. So, not my type of film, period. And I think even as one of these like anti-hero, dark psychological movies, it's still just okay. Joaquin Phoenix is amazing, but the rest of the movie doesn't live up to his level of hype. So, middling for me. I wanted it to be better, and I'm glad it's a different take on a superhero movie, because we had so many of them. You got to make them different somehow. And it's a good attempt, but not a solid landing for me.
All right, Jake.
That's a fair way to put it. And I really liked it. I thought it was a worthy portrayal, and I don't know that it's like some people think it's strictly just pro-violence, and I disagree. I think it's a worthy portrayal of an iconic villain, but I also think it's just a take on society and mental illness, and a really, really interesting one that if you can handle dark and violent, I think it has some stuff to say. And I'm glad that we finally got around to this, because I'm typically not the outlier, and here I clearly am. This was fun. It's a good time.
There are huge gaps about this movie that we just have not been able to cover. Like, we haven't been able to talk about it at all.
Forever.
We didn't talk about Zazie Beetz really at all. A very talented actress who I think was kind of wasted here. Same thing with Brian Tyree Henry. He's in this for like barely any time. We didn't even talk about the whole comedy subjective part and all the rabble-rousing that Todd Phillips has kind of caused before the movie came out. We just don't have time. Yeah. It boils down to this for me. I'm more frustrated. I don't dislike this movie at all. I actually think there's a lot to recommend about it. I think it's definitely worth seeing. I've seen it twice myself. I might see it a third time before the end of the year just to make sure I'm concrete on my thoughts before it's over. Joaquin is fantastic. Technically, it looks awesome. I actually enjoyed most of the last 30 minutes, but overall, if you look at it as a giant grand picture, there's just a disconnect between what he's trying to do and how he executes it. Director Todd Phillips, I mean, specifically. And I think this is something a Scorsese could have pulled off, and he actually thought about directing it at some point. It's something that a more talented filmmaker could do, and I think overall I'm left with a little bit of hollowness here. That'll do it for our review of Joker. Boy, that was an exhausting one. They won't all be like this, folks. Thanks for sticking with us. Before we go, Nate Lungarini, where can you find us on the internet?
Alrighty, so here's how you can get in touch with us. Please like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Middle Seats. You can also listen to us on the go on all your podcast platforms, including SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. For questions, comments, and updates on the show, keep an eye on our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at The Middle Seats. If you like what you hear and you want to see more content, let us know and spread the word.
Thank you guys for joining us this week. We're glad to have you back. I know I speak for both Jake and Nate where I say we're humbled that you listen to us all the time, so thank you for joining us. We have a lot of fun coming up. We've got Star Wars coming up in the next few weeks. We've got Frozen 2 that we might be talking about in passing.
Hopefully Knives Out.
We've got the end of the year. We've got Knives Out. There's a lot of cool stuff coming out. We'll cover as much of it as we possibly can and then pivot to a very successful 2020. For Jake Hensler and Nate Lungarini, I'm Andrew Auger. Keep that seat warm, everyone. We'll be back soon.